the easy way here. Thanks, Bill. Thanks for the opportunity to brief this again. My name is Wes Inkeep from BlankSafe. I've got a naval special warfare background, and this addresses a challenge to safety, especially as it exists with force-on-force training throughout the armed services. Next slide. One of the challenges that faces the modern trainer and the warfighter is that the weapon is still capable of firing live rounds when you're supposed to be shooting blanks, as is the case in most force-on-force type training. Next slide. These incidences are unfortunately relatively common. Most people have experience as warfighters as seeing a blank fire adapter being blown off, having incidents where they've seen live rounds mixed in with the blanks, and a lot of people are hurt or injured every year. There's worldwide lots of incidences where it meets the papers, but you can't see an awful lot of evidence of it happening in safety briefs and outcomes. It becomes a leadership issue if you run up the flagpole, so to speak. Next slide. And so the goal for BlankSafe became to prevent the weapon from firing a live round when you're supposed to be shooting blanks, add safety and confidence to a blank fire evolution. Go ahead. Now, one of the interesting things about our product, and we represent quite a few technology products, but one of the big challenges with BlankSafe is that we based it on the idea that we had a need. We knew that the need existed, the warfighter knows that the need exists, and the leadership knows that the need exists, but there wasn't a requirement, and there still isn't. As was famously coined by Henry Ford, if I'd given the people what they asked for, we'd have faster horses. That's a real challenge when it comes to innovation, and particularly from an innovation corner perspective. How do you develop based on the actual need of the warfighter? How do you develop things that people are going to need or need right now when there's no requirement? The answer is you got to start by building it. And for us, the essence of invention was the difference in length of a live round and a blank round. The live round is a little over a 1/4 inch longer, almost 3/8 in fact, than a blank round. This gave us an opportunity to put something in place to prevent the live round from physically being able to fit in the same place that you need the blank to fit. And we had a long go of this. This development process has not been immediate. Next slide. And in fact, our first invention was a magazine inspection device. The idea was anybody who's ever had to inspect a live round magazine or a blank fire magazine, you have to take a flashlight and look down the bottom of it to see if you've got a live round in the bottom. As is often the case, there'll be 2 or 3 live rounds left. People stack blank rounds right on top of them, not noticing the live ones in the bottom. Inspection takes a lot of time, and there's a lot of anxiety on the part of the inspectors, generally NCOs or enlisted folks, that they have to make sure that it's not in there, but you literally have to shine a flashlight into each magazine. We thought we could solve this, put a spacer into the magazine and physically prevent a live round from being in there. And unfortunately, it was relatively short-sighted. The challenge was you can still grab a live mag. And when we realized how the Army was building it, and the Army was using it, in the Navy, we would shoot blanks for weeks. We'd transition from lip gunning, as we call it, or dry fire, to blanks, and we'd stay blanks for a very long time and do most of our orders of operation as blank fire. And then at some point, you'd switch to live rounds and never really go back. So transitioning from a live mag to a blank-only mag once every couple weeks wasn't a big drama. For the Army, they're going from dry fire to blank fire to live fire in the same day, and they rinse and repeat for about 14 days straight during advanced training. And the challenge for us was that the Army, in particular national training centers, were looking at purchasing blank-only magazines. And we felt that that was going to increase the likelihood of having a blank fire incident, since you weren't removing any of the live rounds or the live magazines necessarily from the field of battle or training. And so what we generated a new product called the Live Round Interrupter. And it functions in a very similar manner as a blank fire adapter. I'm sure some folks here are familiar with BFAs or blank fire adapters. But a gas-operated weapon system requires pressure in the barrel to cycle the weapon. The M4, our M60 derivatives and such all require that gas pressure. And so in order to allow it to cycle, you put a blank fire adapter in that applies the right amount of pressure. What this does is it fits on very similarly to a blank fire adapter. The clamp goes on the outside of the muzzle brake or the flash hider, and then a simple extension down the barrel provides what you see in the graphic. It physically interrupts a live round from firing while allowing a blank round to pressurize the chamber and cycle the weapon. We've gone through about 35 different variants to try to find a tip that worked perfectly and that shunted it exactly properly and stood a high likelihood of interrupting the process, and we've certainly landed on it. This is a better view from a cutaway of how the actual invention works, if there's any question as to where it fits. But the blue part is what's represented here in the clamp, and the rest of it extends down the barrel. Now for us, since we don't have a requirement, the first job that we had to do is find some people who were interested. And we were fortunate to have the Department of the Army Explosive Safety Council express great interest in it. Everybody recognized that while the surveys might not exist for showing the safety challenges, everybody in the room recognized that it happened all the time. And so the Department of the Army Explosive Safety Council sponsored some testing at Aberdeen. Next slide. And we bench tested using a series of metrics with measurement of the bolt speed, how it slowed down and picked up, how far it got into the buffer, etc. We measured live rounds being fired and checked that as a baseline for how the system worked. And then we used a traditional blank fire adapter. We found that the blank fire adapter was sluggish and led to a lot of feed problems overall because it didn't allow it to get all the way into the buffer spring and work properly. Our device, through the miracle of luck, works perfectly. And it actually is almost a direct overlay for the live fire. Something about the way it extends down the barrel, provides increased pressure, interrupts the sonic wave going up and down the barrel. Something is occurring that works very well, and it actually has a very, very lifelike response compared to a blank fire, or compared to a live round. And it survived testing at Aberdeen, worked very well, and we're hoping for a write-up and a release from Aberdeen here shortly. Next slide. These are some of the derivatives. We went from a bronze wrap device to pure parabolic front shapes, and we've kind of landed on a chisel shape, which anybody's welcome to check out. Next slide. Next. Invention and innovation requires a partnership. It was discussed in our intro brief. The reality is now we're at the point where we have to develop that requirement. And somebody has to decide that they want to start saving lives. They want to make this safety a priority. It's also important not to overstate the amount of lives being saved. 3 or 4 guys may be injured per year or killed, but the Army will probably lose 30 this month in motorcycle accidents. With something the size of the Army, you can very easily get lost in the noise if you're only hurting or killing 3 to 4 people a year. And so there's a financial aspect that it represents also, which is every single time you have a live fire incident, you waste essentially a day of training while they shake out all of the rounds and they resort, ensure that everything's had a shakedown, and then they go back into training. Something the size of a national training center, you'll have 14,000 people training all at the same time at a cost of over $1 million a day. If you lose a day's training, it isn't just the day's training that you've lost the $1 million that day's training cost. Additionally, you lost 1/14 of the total training they're going to get because they're only there for 2 weeks. This is the advanced training where they do the primary amount of blank fire training. And there's 10 national training centers, or possibly even more now, across the country. So we're seeing a huge emerging need. Force on force is really the second best way to train for warfighting situations, short of on-the-job training, which the wars overseas have been providing as of late. That partnership isn't done. We're going to end up needing something like this mandated. Ford didn't decide to put seatbelts in the car because they thought it was a good idea and added safety to their clients. They were mandated by Congress to do so. And so at some level, we're going to have leadership that decides they want to put their foot down and require live round interruption for their blank fire adapters, especially at a reasonable price. That's the end of the brief. It's relatively simple in aesthetic and in concept. There's not much to it. It goes in, stops a live round. If anybody's got any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. Outstanding.
Thank you,
Thanks for
Wes.
the opportunity, Bill.